So much to unpack from a game that had its ebbs and flows, plenty of ups and many, many downs later on as the Lakers fell to the Wolves on Friday night. Here with more analysis is our color analyst for West Bloomfield Laker football, Matt Catoni. Matt, thank you for joining me today as we look back on the second consecutive loss for the Lakers. This one arguably way worse than what happened in Oxford because of an utter collapse late in the game. It seemed for a while like West Bloomfield was at least in this ball game. Clarkston certainly in the driver's seat. What happened late in the game that turned it very much in favor of the eventual champions in the Wolves?
Yeah, going into that fourth quarter, it kind of seemed like whoever had the ball last was going to maybe the team that wins the game. But then the Lakers, as you mentioned, just collapsed. And it's just the best way I can think of describing it is a dam cracking. And that's how Clarkston kind of aimed to break this West Bloomfield team. They kept on just hitting them with the Bowman brothers until eventually the Lakers gave way.
Now, early on in the game, it was a war of attrition. West Bloomfield had its longest drive of the season, 9 minutes, 59 seconds, held the ball almost to the entire end of the first half before a Joel Davis receiving touchdown, his second on the season. And it really did seem like it was going to be one in the trenches. Whichever team got tired quicker, whichever team got their weakness exploited more severely and earliest was going to be the one that had the tide turn against their favor, but Clarkston seemed to be able to exploit those weaknesses a little bit better. Do you take that as being more of a factor from their veteran presence and their size, or the Lakers having a problem they could not mitigate through game plan, through strategy, through timeouts, and taking a break?
Well, I think it's both a mix of the talent on the Clarkston roster. The Bowman brothers did a great job, not just on offense, but on defense as well, preventing the Lakers from getting to the perimeter and getting those outside runs that are kind of the forefront and just the key aspect of this offense. But also for the Lakers, it comes back to turnovers. Those 2 interceptions really almost killed the game for them, and just you can't have that playing a team like Clarkston.
You have one of the all-time great running backs in the history of MHSAA football. Definitely one of the best, if not the best, statistically in Division I football history in Ethan the Shark Clark graduate. And then you move on, you have 2 running backs that fill that role, arguably just as well, in Griffin and Lucas Bowman. Griffin on the game, 11 carries, 105 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Lucas had 68 receiving yards, 36 rushing yards, and a pair of touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 1 in the air. But even beyond that, Matt, Alex Wojczenko had one of his all-time best games against West Bloomfield. It seemed like as smooth as we've seen guys like Jackson Carver and even Joel Shakespeare at quarterback for the Lakers be all season long, Alex Wojczenko is kind of what we're hoping maybe Jackson Carver molds into as he continues to mature. And we've seen signs of that going forward. How impressed were you with the gunslinger for the Wolves?
Yeah, I was thoroughly impressed with Alex Wojczenko. I mean, going into this year, there was a big question of how much is he going to improve upon his impressive first year on varsity. And last weekend, he was phenomenal. And he didn't necessarily light up the stat sheet in the passing game, but he didn't make any mistakes, and he just kept the Clarkston offense on schedule and never really got thrown off by the pressure the Lakers were able to get on him.
And now for the Lakers, it's kind of on the other side of that. You look toward their young offense. That offensive line kind of got dominated in the second half. The pressure mounting on Jackson Carver and led to him having to ditch the football out, try to get it to an open receiver, a couple of different quick slants to Joel Davis and other targets. Just trying to get rid of the football and avoid a sack led to his first 2 interceptions of the entire season. Unfortunately, they came at really important moments. So now for the Laker coaching staff, offensive coordinator Ken Rise, head coach and former quarterback himself, Zach Hilbers. What should they be saying? What are you expecting them to be saying in their conversations with the young quarterback after he had a pretty solid game leading up to late in that contest when, as you said, the dam broke and turnovers started to become a big issue and arguably cost the Lakers that game?
I don't think there's necessarily too much the coaching staff needs to say to Carver. I mean, it's kind of, he knows that he can't turn the ball over like that. But the coaching staff itself, I mean, I'm sure they're going into these next few weeks thinking, how can they improve the passing game and what can they do to kind of get the passing game to where that outside run game is? Because going deep into the playoffs, if this passing game is still kind of the looming weakness of this offense, opposing teams are going to key in on that and force the Lakers to throw the football.
And at this point, the Lakers 5-2 overall, middle of the road in terms of where they'll probably be placed in the playoffs. Right now, you're looking down the barrel of facing another possibly first-round matchup with a team like Catholic Central at this point. That is if the playoffs were to start today. But there's still plenty of season left, Matt. 96 minutes of football left for these Lakers. One game at home 2 weeks from now against Roseville. And then this week, a chance to redeem themselves, go back out on the road and take on a team like Bloomfield Hills, which isn't having exactly the greatest season they could be having, but it's a team that's up and coming and incredibly well coached by the legendary Scott Merchant. So what are you looking for from the Lakers this week to bounce back? How important can this week be as we approach playoff time?
Yeah, it's really kind of a get-right game and fine-tuning the offense. It doesn't necessarily need to be a game where you light up the scoreboard, but it needs to be a game where you play a clean game of offense. No turnovers that kill drives, no turnovers that really extend life for the opposing team, and just stuff like that. They can't really get in their own way this week, and it has to be a clean game of football.
Yeah, snooze2u.com does mapatology, basically predictions of where the playoff matchups would be if they were to start today in Division I. West Bloomfield predicted to be going up against Catholic Central in round one in the same region as Brighton, Farmington, Clarkston, and other teams like Heartland, Grand Blanc, and Davison. Would be a very tough going for them, but these last 2 weeks give them an opportunity to pick up some playoff points, and on top of that, the things out of their control, how other teams perform, could have a big impact too. 2 losses could get you a home playoff game, Matt, so these are really important matchups coming up, especially this week against Bloomfield Hills. And it all begins early on in the week in practice. You mentioned it during the game with the turnovers, with some of the quick scores from Clarkston. Got to have short-term memory as you still got plenty of season left ahead. So if you're the Lakers going into this week, what do you imagine are the conversations between the veteran players who have seen a little bit of this story before and the younger players who may be experiencing this kind of, for lack of better terms, devastation after a shocking loss a couple weeks back against Oxford in a way that you probably don't see more than once in your high school career, and then last week, a game that just slipped away from you very quickly against Clarkston?
I think to a degree, it's probably a little bit of, hey, Chicken Little, the sky's not falling. Granted, they've had 2 heartbreaking losses back to back, but that's all their regular season losses at the end of the day, and that's how this team has to look at it. They lost to a very talented team last week, and then they made mistakes that allowed Oxford to end up sneaking away with that win. They have to kind of put those games behind them and still recognize they're a very talented team. They can't make mistakes like that will cost them the game. So going forward, as long as they can kind of keep their heads held high and their heads on their shoulders, I think they can compete with anyone.
2-5, Bloomfield Hills is on the docket this week. The Lakers will travel to Bloomfield Hills High School on Friday night, 7 o'clock kickoff. We'll have information on where you can see that game on CivicCenterTV.com. Then they'll conclude the season with currently 4-3 Roseville, a team that gave them some trouble a year ago and gave them that final regular season loss by just 1 point. So a lot of competitive football ahead for the West Bloomfield Lakers. And we talk about all the bad. It's easy when you lose 38-10, as the Lakers did on their homecoming game last Friday. It cost them the OAA Red Division Championship, where they would have had a share of that title had they won the game. The scoreboard makes it seem a lot worse than it actually was, Matt, because as you said, really until the fourth quarter came around, this was a very close matchup, and we saw the Lakers in some critical points make some big plays. 4th down, forcing an offside on Clarkston, something they hadn't been able to pull off all season. Usually it's been them jumping during their own hard counts in those sorts of situations. 3rd down and 4th down conversions, showing their toughness and continuing to get guys like Obi Duru and Will Espy heavily involved in the running game and making big plays. This Lakers team still has plenty of promise across all 3 phases.
Yeah, really, in the way that their leaders in the trenches and the playmakers that they have, they can really just take time off the clock no matter what the situation is. And that's what I think the Lakers kind of have to play into going into these next few weeks in the playoffs, is that time of possession game, just eating the clock and not necessarily going for the big plays, but taking those 3 to 4 yards that they've been able to get fairly easily all year.
And they've been consistently able to do that. It's a great point. 3-4 yards per carry was something that Justin Pinter, the head coach of Clarkston, said was his hope for his team against a very stout Lakers defense. They were able to pull that off and have very successful drives all throughout that particular game. Nonetheless, most of their drives were relatively short for West Bloomfield in that game, and I'd have to review my boards and my notes to get the exact time of possession off the top of my head. I don't have it immediately here with me, but in terms of time of possession, the Lakers consistently have been able to put together 3-4-minute drives and the occasional 6-minute drive too along the way, 5-minute drive along the way. They can do that. They had a 10-minute drive last game that was successful and tied that game up. War of attrition, keeping the ball away from some pretty prolific offenses that you're likely going to see in the Division I playoffs, going to be a key for the Lakers. Matt Catoni is with us, our color commentator for our live coverage of West Bloomfield Laker football. If you missed last week's game, it's available for you on civiccentertv.com/Lakersports. Matt, as we look forward to Friday, as you said, kind of that game to right the ship for the Lakers going up against Bloomfield Hills, a chance to play spoiler in what will likely be an increased hype environment for senior night over at Bloomfield Hills. You look at the schedule, you see a 2-5 team. You see Bloomfield Hills High School, which has not had a lot of success on their football schedule in recent years. First year under a new head coach, trying to get their program situated for the future. This looks like a game that you can really make a big impact on the field for the Lakers. How important is it for them to come out on Friday and play a full 48 minutes at full force to not only get back on track, but to show them what true north is going to be for the home stretch of this season?
Yeah, really. I think one thing in this game is I want to see the offense come out, not necessarily attack downfield, but kind of get Jackson Carver going a little bit and kind of allow him to build his confidence after those rare interceptions last week. But again, as you mentioned, the biggest aspect of winning this week is setting yourself up for potentially having a home playoff game and avoiding a team like Catholic Central.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. We got one more minute with you, Matt, before we got to move on. We're up against it now at this point, but you still have a chance at a home playoff game. You're probably not going to get home field advantage. You're absolutely not going to get home field advantage. You're likely not going to get 2 consecutive home games unless you get really lucky with an upset down the bracket in your first round matchup. But that's another big part of this, Matt. You want to get extra home games. You don't want Roseville to be the home finale. That's got to be an impact for these Lakers as well. Matt, your final thoughts as we head into into the penultimate week of the season this Friday at Bloomfield Hills.
Really just keep treading. That's what I think this Lakers team needs to do. Yeah, they kind of got beat up last week, but I think as long as they can keep their head above the water and not lose that confidence in themselves, they can still compete with any team in the state.
And that they will try to do on Friday, get back on track after a very close loss against Oxford and the very close game that ended in a tragic collapse for West Bloomfield on homecoming night against Clarkston. We'll be there. We'll be talking about it all throughout the rest of the season right here on Civic Center TV and on the Splash Live. Matt, thanks as always.
Thank you for having me.